Alright, it's a new day, and this has been draining for a while overnight, and that has now filled up that pan, so we had a ton of fluid inside of that torque tube, that's for sure. I thought a lot came out yesterday, but clearly there was more yet to be had. And again, I'm not exactly sure of what type of fluid it is. It's thick enough that there's got to be differential fluid mixed in there with it, but it could be a combination. So anyway, that's really not what I'm going to focus on today, though. At least at the beginning here, we're going to start off with looking at the torque ball. I've got the seals for that. I want to run the car, run it in drive, and have it run for a while and see exactly what those seals are doing at the back of the train. I should mention that the manual reminds you pretty strong here that the correct adjustment of the torque ball is important. If it's loose and if it has end play, not only would it be noisy, it says it will act as a pump to cause a leakage of transmission lubricant. So anyway, it's got to be right. I'm going to go start up the car and warm it up a bit, and we're going to put it in drive and watch the transmission spin if I can, and see if that doesn't induce some kind of a leak or give me some type of a view of the seals before I start working on them. So there you can see I'm in drive. I've got the transmission spinning around there a little bit. I'm not flexing the torque ball or anything like that. That would normally be part of your operation while you're driving. So far, not exactly a smoking gun. Then again, the transmission was a little low, so I'm going to top up the transmission and see if that doesn't change what's coming out of it right now. Well, I haven't had any leaks or anything like that coming out of the back of the transmission, whether I'm in drive or not. I've been filling up the transmission and just kind of playing around with the level, and I'll run it for a while and then add some and run some and add some for a bit. So I haven't really caught any smoking gun of transmission fluid coming out. No, that's not a true running driving test, because the torque ball is normally flexed right and left and up and down while you're driving, and depending on where it's flexing, that may absolutely change whether or not it's going to seal well or not. I went ahead and fashioned this club that they recommend making in the manual on the wood lathe. Oh my goodness, it was like it has to be a 1-inch diameter on the end, and then at the end, when you got your torque ball installed, you, at this distance here out on the end of the club, you pull and see if you can get up to about 30 or 35 pounds of pull on the torque ball before it moves. So I'm going to go ahead and just move that torque ball around a little bit with this club and see if I can get it to leak, just for curiosity. I'm still going to wind up changing the seal, whether or not it's a leaking seal or not. It would be disappointing to find out that all I needed to do was just be more patient and keep adding more and more transmission fluid to it. But anyway, we'll just go ahead and keep going with this, because again, you really can't tell if it's going to leak until it's actually hooked up to the torque tube and it's being flexed. But let's try this anyway. So there's not much room for me to film under here, but as you can see, when I move this around, it's certainly not smooth in there or anything of the such. It kind of jerks and moves around a little bit. I couldn't tell you, I don't have the feel for putting my hand here and pulling down and seeing if that's 35 pounds of pressure or up to. That might be a little tight. Not exactly smooth. But anyway, let's change the angle a little bit here and see if that has any effect whatsoever. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was looking rather than the videotaping. We'll move this around a little bit here, and then I'm gonna see if, turn it on, start it up, and see if it causes any type of a leak or anything like that. Well, the end result was it was keeping hold of the transmission fluid, and I never was able to reproduce a leak. So, nonetheless, I still, because I have new seals and because I'm this far into it, I've got to go ahead and replace this torque tube seal. And then we'll move on to addressing the somewhat important problem of this rear differential leak going down into the torque tube as well. So at least in case it wasn't leaking, or in case I should have just kept putting more and more oil into it before, at the very least I can address this torque tube differential leak and feel better about that. Alright, for adjustment of the torque ball, disconnect the rear axle assembly and move it back out of the way. Well, that's easy. Alright, disconnect the thrust plate from the rubber thrust pad. Then you remove the torque ball boot, thrust plate, gasket, torque ball retainers, and shims from the rear bearing retainer. They recommend marking everything so that you can put everything back in its original position. Of course, I've got some new parts to put on here as well. These are shims. That is, I think there might be, yeah, there's multiple shims here depending on what thickness you need. And they updated I think they got rid of the boot, and now they have a different type of seal right there. So that's an upgraded system. Alright, let's get to taking some parts off. Sorry that I'm working sideways again, there's just no room though. So these are different bolts and nuts here. So I'm going to go ahead and take those off. Then we'll move on to these guys here. Alright, 3 special kind of rubber bushing nuts removed. Now let's get on the rest of these. 1, 2, 3, looks like probably 6 all the way around there. So these here are 4 flange bolts, and I'm kind of keeping these separate for a moment. Here's the 1, 2, 3, 4 holes around there. There's 2 more bolts on the top, but I'm not sure if they're the same length or not, so I'm going to kind of segregate these out for a moment until I'm convinced that every one of those bolts is identical. So I just pulled the flange right off there. I'm just going to pull it over here just to show it. Maybe they call that the thrust plate. It's a pretty substantial plate. And now I'm going to remove, there's 2 more bolts on top there that you can't see, and I just want to see if those are the same length, the same bolts as the 4 below it, in case I have to mark those and keep those separate. So just for documentation, all the 6 bolts around that housing right there, they're all the same. You don't have to treat them any different one for the other. They're all identical. So now we're going to see if we can get the rest of these parts to kind of slip off here. So I'm going to see just how loose this is. Pretty loose. I won't be able to one-hand this and videotape it at the same time, but I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't slip this all off as one assembly and keep the order of things while I do that. So mostly for my own memory, this housing right here can come right off, slip off before the rest of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And put that to the side. Looks like we can slip off some shims. That looks like a modern paper shim, so I think this torque ball has actually already been worked on once before, possibly, not sure. But I'm going to remove that one. That notch gets installed with the drain hole down. I'm going to show, can you see right there how those holes line up? Like that's off, that's on. That notch I can tell from the manual it says it gets installed down. This looks like it is about to come off. Let's see if we can wiggle it around. Alright, I'm gonna put the camera down and see if I can get this off. Just wanted to show you that's the part that I'm struggling with. I'm almost off that shaft there, but I've got to wrangle it off here, and I can't do it one-handed. I've almost wrangled this off. It's being very stubborn on that last part right there. There's another plate and then another shim behind here as well, so I want to kind of keep track of this orientation. I'm gonna twist and play with this here to see if I can't get it to slide off fully, but it is being pretty stubborn. Just FYI, I wound up using a slide hammer to finally pull this guy all the way off of that shaft there. It was not gonna go very tightly put on. So here's the rest of the torque ball. With that housing removed, then I can go ahead and lift this off, and there's a shim kind of coming off with it, partially. And there's the U-joint coming off of the back of the transmission. Okay, so this is what we got now. So here was our, I think they're going to call this the inner retainer. And I have polished this up a little bit there. You can see that wearing that is on there. There was actually this guy here. Actually, a couple of these, I think, that were on the inside behind this here. I don't believe that's correct. I believe that that is actually, should have been one gasket. Like this. Hold on. Underneath. Should have been followed by another gasket. And then one or two shims, depending on how many you need. Let's see here. Torque ball. And retainer. Like that. I've already popped this seal out here, and we'll be putting a new seal on there on the bench. I hope I can, if I put this on, that I can get that back over that tube. It really was pretty tough getting it off. But anyway, let's just kind of reverse this for a moment. So that was brand new. This will be the new part going in. Old part. I did polish that. You can see how it was. They recommend polishing it there if you need to get rid of any old rubber or anything. Not exactly thrilled with that. I don't know if you can see that very well or not. That's some scoring and some other things that have happened there at some point in time. Can't really tell what was going on there. But there's also not much that I can do about it. So we'll just go ahead and keep using that. You can really see also right here how someone was kind of pounding on here at one point in time. I don't know if that was to get the a new replacement seal like this one on there, and they just got a little carried away. I'll be using like a flat board or something like that to pound mine in when I'm done. But anyway, and these again are the adjusting shims that you'll use to get your thickness right with a inner and outer gasket. I think that is the proper way to do that. So anyway, let's see if we can get that seal put on there. Okay, I'm going to spend a little bit of time cleaning up these this surface right here on the inside. I can't videotape any of this because I'll be spraying cleanser all over and I'll kill my camera. Of some interest right here is the speedometer cable sticking off to the side, I do believe. And I always kind of wondered, you can just see that little gear right in there and some threads there kind of catching those teeth off of the U-joint there, and that's what's transmitting your speedometer information there. Ironically, I bought a new speedometer cable because the other one was noisy. But now that the oil has really set on the cable here, when I was in drive and I was running it up and down the gears, it was actually very quiet. So I'm not really sure if I even needed to replace the speedometer cable, but I'm going to go do it anyway because I got one here. So, hi. So I, of course, should give a shout out to Fatsco Transmission Parts who got me this kit. They do send you a piece of paper here that just kind of goes over what you should be doing, because this is a updated from the original torque ball repair kit. And again, it says here, so there's gaskets between the inner and the outer retainer. So here's the inner retainer. Hold on. This one's the inner retainer. This one's the outer retainer. And again, the gaskets between the inner and outer retainer are shims and are used to set up the correct drag on the torque ball, kind of reinforcing to me that I need to have a proper gasket on one side, a proper gasket on the other side, and then we'll adjust how tight or loose this torque ball is on there with these paper shims right there, in addition to that gasket there. I'm assuming that it takes at least, I'm hoping it takes at least one gasket for the proper tension. And it does talk about putting the new gasket, or the new seal, I should say, on the back of this torque ball prior to installing. So hopefully I can get that on there and then still get that popped over that U-joint propeller shaft connection there, because it is a very tight connection. So I'll be cleaning this out really good on the inside here to make sure that I don't make things any harder for myself. That seal was a booger, and it took a press and some flat metal to actually manage to ever get it down in there. It went hard. I can see why they were getting frustrated here if they were doing it without a press. Okay, so I've got my assembly on here. I was able to get that mocked up, and if you'll notice up right there, that little guy there is a headless guide pin. I just took a bolt. There's one on the other side too, and cut the heads off of them and stuck them in there, and that way you can hang your assembly up there without it falling and trying to jack with all the other bolts at the same time. And that was the manual's idea, not mine. So I can see already that the challenge is going to be to slip that outer ball retainer over this, because remember, there's a seal that was very tight seal on there. I've already put it up there once, and it totally is just going to be very hard to squeeze over that. I'm hoping that I can just lay it up there, get some bolts started, and start to cinch it down using the bolts, because I'm now suspect. Let me see if I can show it. So this guy has to go on here next, and it's a tight fit, and those that seal that we just pressed on there, that lip is way over that as well. So that is going to be hard to get that back on there. Hard to get that back on. Hopefully, if I was to put that other ball on there, I might be able to. I don't even want to come off. I need to get that lubed up a little bit before I try to go putting that back on. But yeah, we'll see if we can get that to squeeze back on by using some of the bolts to do the squeezing for me. I'm afraid what was done before was probably they got this on here, realized how hard it was, and they started hammering on it, and that's the reason that you see those hammer marks right there. So anyway, let's see what happens. So fortunately that worked. Just running them up fairly tight was able to pull that rubber over that shaft, and it went over with kind of a thunk. It was definitely tight, and hammering was not the way to go. You need to just pull it over and cinch it up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to back these bolts off, all of them I think, or almost all of them, or loosen them up. You have to put the flange back on here, it says, while you're tightening up this stuff. And I took a guess that it's going to be one inner gasket, one outer gasket, and I've got one shim on here. We'll see how that works, because what you do next is as you tighten all this stuff up, I have to put my wooden club I've made in here and kind of tighten and wiggle and tighten and wiggle and get it on there as good as you can, and then but not get it too tight. And I may actually have to remove this again, which I'm not looking forward to, but if you have to, you have to get rid of one of those shims there, like that green one I just put on there right there. We'll see. I got one more shim in addition to it, but I'm not going to use it for right now. So anyway, let's get to reassembling this a little bit and tightening things up and adjusting. Just before I started tightening everything up, I realized this guy had gotten spun around. That flat edge is supposed to be down here with the gasket. Not happy that I almost missed that, but at least I caught it now. Better than later. All right, rechecking and double checking myself, making sure that this notch, which has a gasket behind here, so don't think it's just open and draining here, but they do call that an oil drain hole. My goodness. And maybe if you have a leak, it's supposed to come out there. I don't know. That's supposed to be down. There is a gasket behind there. I'll put a gasket over that, and then a shim, and then the retainer, and make sure that everything is lined up as it's supposed to. All right, take two. All right, now we got everything properly lined up. Got my flange on. All the gaskets are on and lined up. Hopefully the number of shims that I picked is actually the winner. I guess if I have to, I'll take it apart again. It's not that bad. It turns out that the original time that I took that off, because it had been hammered, this edge right here had been curled in, and that was, I think, part of what was... well, I'm not exactly sure why it was so hard to get off there, but it turns out that you could push it on by hand. So that seal isn't that tight against there. It's pretty tight, but it's not as tight as what I was afraid it would be. Anyway, so 35 to 40 pounds of torque on each one of these bolts, round and round and round, loosening this up all the while as you're going to get it very evenly centered. And when you get to 35 or 40, hopefully you have... it says actually about 15 pounds of pull in the new kit that I got. So we'll see how this goes. So we've got it in there, and that's about at 15 pounds of pressure, which is what my new guide is there. I like that. That has plenty of chance to move around, but it's not too tight. So very good, very good. So I'm going to run it again, make sure it isn't leaking anything, and then we'll call that good for the day. Well, I thought I'd be done, but I had time for one more thing, so I thought I should do it since I had a part come in. That's new speedometer cable there. I chipped away at, there's a rubber grommet there in the far wall that was actually pretty hard to get through. And then here's the old cable that I had passed through. It just literally unscrews out. This just unscrews out of the head of the speedometer in there. And then I'll go underneath here and screw the end of the cable into the automatic transmission. And that's all there is to that. It's pretty easy.